Howdy, howdy. As you all know, I'm Jackson Osborne with Bluegrass Trust. Just a joke, I'm not Jackson. Jackson is on a mission for the next couple of months. If you don't know, he and his wife have welcomed their first child. And so he is on paternity leave for a couple of months. Paid, I might add, because we're the Bluegrass Trust and we wanted to keep our staff happy and healthy and those families supported. So he'll be back with us for the August deTour. But with that, I'm actually John Coleman, the Executive Director of the Bluegrass Trust. And if you haven't been to a deTour before, we are so honored to welcome you to our deTours. We do this the first Wednesday of every month at 6 o'clock. They are always free. They are always open to the public. So if you haven't joined our social media, our email list, feel free to pick up one of these brochures and do that. Because we want to keep track of all of the really cool things that are going on with the Bluegrass Trust. If you are free next month, on July 9th, we have to move it a little bit because of the holiday, so it'll be the second Wednesday. But on July the 9th at 6 p.m., we are going to Walnut Hill Presbyterian Church, one of the oldest churches in central Kentucky. It's right on the sort of the outskirts of Fayette County. If you haven't had a chance to see this historic stone church, come out and join us. It'll be a really amazing way to spend your early July. With the Bluegrass Trust, I always want to say thank you to our donors, our supporters. I see several of you here. It's because of you that we have such great programming for education, for direct services, and for our advocacy work. We are not a state or federally funded organization. It's our local grassroots community that keeps the Bluegrass Trust going. And you've been doing this now for 70 years, founded in 1955, yeah. So we have a year that we've been celebrating all year long, so thank you. And if you're not one of our members, you want to be. So feel free to grab our membership brochure there and consider becoming a member of the Bluegrass Trust. I know you will be glad to do. So for June, this is a very special deTour. We are partnering with the Faulkner Morgan Archive, an organization very close to my own heart, because I helped to co-found it 10 years ago. And so that nonprofit has been growing too. And 2 years ago now, we were able to welcome our first full-time employee, which is Josh Porter. So Josh is going to lead us on our Pride of Place tour tonight. And I'm going to hand it over to him.
So I'm Josh Porter, the Assistant Executive Director of the Faulkner Morgan Archive. So I'll be leading you through the tour today. So I'm going to first give an overview before we start of the path that we're going to go on, just so you kind of know what's in store. So if you want to grab one of these brochures as well as you walk past, we're not hitting every stop, don't worry. We're hitting about 5 of them, I'd say. But we are going to start at the front door for the car complex, talk about history there. We'll go around to the Jeffrey Watson Historic Marker and talk in the back of the bar complex. Then we'll walk over here to the Fairness Ordinance Historic Marker. Then we will walk in front of the library and talk a bit. And then we'll go inside the library because we have an exhibit up here, and everywhere that is funded by 250 Left. So we just unveiled that last week. So we're going to check that exhibit out for a few minutes, and then we'll walk in front of Crossings Lexington on Limestone, and then we'll finish up at the Sweet Union Police mural, also on Limestone. So we got 30 to 45 minutes, lots of stops, by the way. I won't be talking as we walk, we'll stop and talk. It should be pretty doable. So, and if you have any questions as I talk, please chime in. If you experienced any of this history and want to chime in for history, I love that as well. So if you want to grab brochures, we're going to meet. I'll stand in front of the door if you want to kind of face the bar right over here. We'll talk about that a little bit. Thank you. You can keep filling in a little bit on this side. So when we've talked about Kentucky's LGBTQ history, and specifically Lexington's queer history, Bar Complex really pops up as sort of the center of a lot of that, simply because it is such a long-standing institution and building. And so I wrote this down because I always forget the dates. There's been a lot of things from here. So as early as 1939, it was the Mayfair Bar. It is considered to be a place that gay people were gathering, same-sex couples were dancing and talking, and it was very much a safer space than many others. Starting in 1949, then in 1953, it became the Southern Cocktail Lounge, which is very similar vibes to the Mayfair Bar. Then in 1963, it became the Gilded Cage, which is arguably the first exclusively gay bar in the States. It was opened by a gay couple from Chicago. And then in 1967, it became the living room. And this is when drag shows began here. There were renovations. There was a wrought iron spiral staircase right here in the front that went up to the second floor dance floor. And so I believe that was just this building as well. It was not 226 yet, just 224. And so drag started in 1967 with the living room. And then in 1974, it became the Montparnasse, which is an upscale cafe during the day and a bar at night. And then 1978, it became Johnny Angel, which was a huge renovation. Upstairs, the dance floor is nicknamed the $1 Million Dance Floor. The neon lights were designed by the same company who did CO 54. People like Grace Jones performed up there just a few months after it opened. And so that was sort of, Johnny Angel's a lot of people see as sort of the heyday of this building and of this bar. And then a few years after that, 1980, is when it became the Bar Complex. And sort of the thing that I like to talk about with that name of the Bar Complex is it really does take the input of all of its history into it. And so the three names of the Gilded Cage, Living Room, and Johnny Angel's are all reflected in this space. And so this front room right here, this front bar, is nicknamed sort of the living room bar, much more loungy. There are sort of buffet seating and bench seating in a bar. And then you go over to the Gilded Cage showroom, which is where the drag performances happen, where there's a stage and tables and chairs in that room. And then upstairs, you go to the dance floor, which is Johnny Angel's disco up on that floor. So this has really been around for nearly 100 years in one way or another, and has truly served as sort of a center of a lot of queer history in the city. And for a lot of people, this was really the space that they would all meet. But it's also interesting to be talking about it at the front door, because for the first, 80 years of its life, 70 years of its life, no one used the front door. Everyone went into the back door from the parking lot. Everyone. That's a very new, recent thing that people are coming to the front door, I have learned. And so yeah, it's a long history. A lot has happened here. So we have this historic marker, which talks about the first lesbian couple in the U.S. to sue for a marriage license, Marjorie Jones and Tracy Knight. So that they sued in Louisville, but they actually had their wedding here at the Bar Complex, which then would have been the living bar. And so it's sort of this, again, sort of the center of where we talk about a lot of this history, where a lot of this stems from. Most queer people in the city have some relationship to this bar in one way or another. Any questions? Questions or comments? Yeah.
You mentioned founder.
It has changed a lot, and I wish I could tell you all of their names. Right now, the owner is Joey Brookshire, I believe. But before that, the only ones that I know off the top of my head were Esther Wilson and John Hill. John Hill. Esther Wilson and John Hill were who made it to Gilded Cage in 1967. But after that, yeah, I personally don't recall those.
I believe there was a guy named Bean in the early 80s, only because I knew his ex-wife.
I can only imagine.
When they bought it in the early 80s, I think it was a conglomerate of 4 different individuals who bought it in 1980, and Joey was the only one who survived until like 1986.
So Joey's been running this bar as the Bar Complex since 1986, so almost 40 years. It's been running as the Bar Complex.
What about the building? When was it constructed?
Early 1900s, I believe.
Because I love the orange brick.
Yeah, the orange is fairly new for like in the history of the building. But I remember way back when this was like a lumber yard. Yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah, this building itself has been around for way before the bar.
That's a good question. Do you know, Erica, when exactly the structures themselves were built? I know it's before 1900 because they're in that Eastern Share photographs.
So there's not like a specific date, but I think it's actually early 1900s.
Is that brick? Is that not this Cambridge?
I'm not sure. It is, and it's different from
Oh, and that's part of it too. So when it became Johnny Angel was the time that it actually moved into 226 Main Street as well. And so Johnny Angel, the disco dance floor, is actually on top of that building. This is where the bar is upstairs, but then over there is where the actual dance floor, and that's where the drag room is. And so that was the first time that drag moved into that space as well. So it originally was in, I believe, the very back of the bar where the staircase is now.
And it was downstairs, right? Wasn't
I
it downstairs?
think so. It might have been
It was
something.
both. So
Yeah, it
there
was like-
so the buildings didn't combine until the Johnny Angels days, so 1976 or something. It actually caught on fire, and then that's when they decided to combine the two buildings. And it was at that time owned by a guy. His name was Bill Sheehan, who was a lawyer. I don't think he was South African, but he represented the apartheid government of South Africa, interestingly enough. But was a huge New York lawyer, had a horse interest here, and he wanted his own gay bar. So he bought the gay bar, and he's the one who expanded it into the two buildings. So that building there has been all kinds of things over its history. I know it was an auto repair shop at one point, and it was a Tom McCann
Bowling alley.
a Tom McCann shoe store.
Oh my God.
But this has almost always been either like a restaurant or a bar. Or it was a Veterans of the Foreign Wars once for like a hot 8 months or something.
Wasn't there also like a speakeasy component to it?
And so one of the most, when it was the Mayfair, when it opened as the bar of the Mayfair. And that, So when it opened as the bar of the Mayfair, it was, which would have just been this portion here, not this larger portion. So the upstairs was a notorious bookie joint.
Bookie joint, that's what it was.
It's an open spread bookie.
Yeah, it was very worse. I mean, it was basketball driven because Adolf Rupp was actually, there were charges for him based on being here and being influenced by him.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, they were trying to bury that.
But there was a form of bookieing that was supposedly invented on the, and that's apparently how they still do booking to this day. But it was a really sort of shady, notorious bar, illegal activity. And that's often how gay bars or gay-friendly bars worked. I mean, it was illegal. And so the Mayfair was the first bar when we were doing our interviews that had that reputation of not being a gay bar, but a gay-friendly bar. Like, they would tolerate queer people coming to this bar as long as they behaved themselves in a certain way. Because they were already being criminals, right? And so it very famously, here in this bay window, this is where the spiral staircase was. And so which was there until they actually combined the two buildings. So there are some photographs of, folks on that spiral staircase. It was apparently really treacherous, sometimes getting up and down. And,
Especially in heels.
I would imagine, yes. It's probably had a right time.
Any other questions for Con?
I was just going to make a comment that I find it fascinating that this would actually be a meeting space. I would have thought that gay bar would be kind of tucked away, but it's in light of what you were saying, there were a couple of illegal things happening. It kind of makes sense.
Well, and that's part of why I'm talking about. So we're going about to go to the back of the bar, go around, and And so that was really the main entrance. They didn't really see this.
Right.
This was really the back of the bar to them.
Yeah.
You know, the drag shows were happening back there. All that was happening in the back. And so, yeah, the front, this being the front is a very new kind of thing in its long history.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not that old, but I remember when there was no sign on this front. Like it was, yeah. And if someone went through the front door, you knew that they had never been to the bar. Which could be a good thing, or it could be a bad thing.
There's still some historically significant decor in there too,
Oh, yeah.
right? The Elton John chandeliers, maybe?
Yeah, so there are two things that you can actually see kind of through the windows. There's this gilded mirror that I believe is from Bill Breezing's house. They bought at the auction. And then there are red chandeliers that are from Elton John's wedding that Bradley Picklesheimer brought because he was doing event planning and helped plan the wedding. So, yeah, so the red sort of chandeliers that are down the bar, kind of hard to see the lights are on, but those are from Elton John's wedding too. Cool. Let's go to the back of the bar. And so I will lead the way that way. I'm going to go that way.
Can you see them there with your? Oh, that's cool. They're closed, unfortunately, on Wednesdays.
Yeah. So that was the leather. No, the coats they were done long before my arrival. So of course crossing the store. But it was, you know, it started out as this. Even in my early days, they could get to bring, you know, drag queens, get little girls there. Now it's owned by lesbians.
So how long have you been there?
Since 07.
I've been here 5 years. First year was COVID. So
Where did you come from?
Ohio.
Okay. What brought you to Lexington?
Well, I took care of my parents, and when they passed away, the house was left to me and my sister. That's 5 years. It took me 5 years. 20 acres, something like that. I don't know. And my family lived there. It was right down Swingle or something. Oh. Having a room too.
Mom's hung you in the closet and I'm feeling so sad.
No, I drove around.
Very well adjusted.
So as I talked about, the bar complex is seen as the center of a lot of the history here, but it's not only what happened inside of the bar, but also what happened outside and around. And so you can see over there the gray building, that's the back of the bar. And as we walk past it a little bit, you'll see the door that sort of everyone goes into, or at least used to, people still do. But in this area, so there was this brick wall right here, used to be only about 2 or 3 feet tall, and that was the center of Lexington's male prostitution circuit. And so young men would sit on that wall, and other men would drive around and pick them up for prostitution. And so that was really what that was happening, really in connection to the back of the bar. All of this was very much happening because the bar was here.
And that was Wolf Wiles?
Yes. In the back, yep, right around this brick wall, right in the back. And so in 1985, there was a police sting, and they arrested 19 of those men for soliciting sex. And they were all charged, and Jeffrey Wasson ended up being the only one to challenge the lawsuit, or challenge the arrest. And so the lawsuit took a long time, but in 1992, they overturned the sodomy law in Kentucky, and that was we were really the first state to do that after the AIDS epidemic really took hold. So really kind of monumental thing that all happened because he got arrested on this corner for soliciting sex from a police officer. And so this historic marker in the middle of the parking lot, I think, is very fitting for that history. And so yeah, the back of this bar, again, was almost just as important, if not more important to people than the front of the bar. There's underage people that couldn't get in, all sort of hung out in the back parking lot. It became sort of a bar of its own, hanging out, sitting in their cars, smoking, drinking, all this happening right in the back of the bar. Any questions?
It's worth noting that my name is Thomas Tolliver. I had the fortunate or misfortune of being a reporter at the Herald Leader at the time of this lawsuit when Jeffrey was challenging the legality of the sodomy law. But what's notable is when this marker was dedicated, you had here, and I took a picture of it, Judge Lewis Paisley, who was a district court judge, who was the first judge to say this law is unconstitutional. It was appealed to the circuit court, and it was tackled.
Julian?
Not the woman, the man, Charles, I don't remember his first name, Tackett on the circuit court, who upheld the lower court, and it bypassed the Court of Appeals and went to the Kentucky Supreme Court. And it was the lower court upheld that it was unconstitutional. But I mention that only to say that we ought to give a lot of credit not only to Wasson, but to the judges who stood at a time when it was not politically correct to do so and say this law is unconstitutional. I admire Charlie Tackett was his name. I admire Judge Lewis Paisley for what he's done. He's still around.
Nice.
That's not it.
Yeah.
I don't know everything, so I love when people. Any other questions, comments? Awesome. So we're gonna walk this way to the front of the government building with the Fairness Ordinance historic marker. This will be our next stop. And as you walk past the bar, you can see the brick around the door on the first floor, and also a black box on the top of the building that used to have a neon sign that was blue that said Johnny Angel.
Oh.
It is no longer there, but there is a red neon sign inside.
The archive is going to put a mirror on this wall right here.
We met you at
outside.
Is that what?
Yes,
not very aesthetic.
I've never noticed that black box before. Yeah.
Yeah, it sure was. Those were Bell racing gutters.
Yeah. We can wait a little while. It's still. I bet people will try to get that. I think restored. It's now such a iconic site in this part of downtown.
We can keep going this way. They're the same on both sides. As long as you see one side. Also, if you don't have one and you want one, I have tons of these brochures still in my bag if you need one, even just as a fan. But if you guys want to scoot over this way a little bit so you can have everyone, my voice projected better. So this historic marker is one of three or the final of three that we have seen that are about LGBTQ history in Lexington. And they were the first ones in Kentucky, I believe, or at least two of them were the first ones. But these are the only three that exist in Lexington at the moment on LGBTQ history, and they're all on this one block. If that says anything about this sort of history of this block. But this marker sort of talks about the fairness ordinance that passed in Lexington in 1999, in July. And it passed in Louisville a few months earlier, and also in 1999. But the fairness campaign that pushed for this ordinance started all the way in 1991, I believe. And I mean, organizing it happened before that even too, but the official fairness campaign started in 1991, and it took them 8 years to get the ordinance passed in Louisville and then in Lexington. But now that ordinance is passed in like 20 to 25 cities maybe, throughout Kentucky. There is no statewide fairness ordinance yet, but there are many state or county and city wide fairness ordinances. But of note that this passed in the city council. Actually, Mayor Linda Gordon was on the council and just shared recently at the opening of the exhibit we're about to see that she got calls and death threats about how if she voted for this ordinance, that they like threatened her kids, her family, if she voted yes in this ordinance, and she really saw that as the reason to vote yes. As if this is how the hate that people have, then we need to have these legal protections for housing, employment, and public accommodations. So the fairness ordinance is really major, and so it's sort of a landmark thing that happened in Kentucky. Yeah, it was 1999, January, I believe, in Louisville, and then July in Lexington. After many years of work, and the fairness campaign still exists today. They still do advocacy work for a lot of legislation in the state, really fighting for LGBTQ rights in Kentucky. So fairness really is a central part of a lot of the activism that has happened in Kentucky as a whole. Any questions about this or comments or experiences?
They didn't put this marker up until...
Yeah, very recently. So all these markers were since 2018, I believe, is the earliest marker. All these have been put up since then. So Just Fund Kentucky is the one who funded it as well, the nonprofit. They give out grants for LGBTQ programming, and so they help fund some of these historic markers as well.
Awesome.
8 years, was that a legal thing that was taking 8 years?
It was a lot. It was protesting. It was going to city council meetings. It was votes failing. It was marches. It was a lot of organizing. A lot of mail letters being sent to people. A lot of getting the community on board. So yard signs, T-shirts, posters, flyers, like everything under the sun. And so now it's the 26th anniversary of the year. So actually, the University of Louisville, they did a big commemorative exhibit on the 25th anniversary. So you can see a lot of the photos and posters and things at U of L, which is really cool.
Louisville was the same year?
Yeah, Louisville was January and we were July.
I think it's interesting to note that most of that time, like those 8 years, 7.5 of it was getting Louisville to pass it. So I forget how many times it failed before their city council, but it was several. But Lexington passed a more expansive ordinance on its very first try through our city council.
Wow.
So I think they, and lots of, Pam Miller was the mayor, she was super supportive of it. Lots of great council members. Gloria Martin, who's still around, Linda. It was, I think maybe there were 3 dissenting votes, but it was pretty much a super majority that went for it. Speaking of historic markers, some great things I just got today. So these are the first 3. There is now 4th in Louisville, but there's going to be a 5th this month. Anyone want to guess where it's going to be? Go ahead. You would think, but no. And it's not going to be on this block either.
Is it in Lexington? Bowling Green?
Winchester, Kentucky.
No.
And it's going to honor Dr. John Fryer. So Dr. John Fryer was a Winchester native. And so in the 1970s, he goes to Transy. And then he makes his way to Philadelphia, and he becomes a psychiatrist there, very well respected. And in the 1970s, he goes before the APA. Hey, it's our bookkeeper. And so I forget the year, but he gives a very important talk in front of the APA about the fact that he is a homosexual, he is a psychiatrist, and that homosexuality was not a mental illness. Now, he did this as Dr. Anonymous. So he wore a big baggy suit, he wore a really weird-looking face mask, and he actually had a microphone that distorted his voice. Because had they known that he was a homosexual, he would have been fired. He would have been disbarred from practice. And so his speech in front of the APA is pretty much single-handedly attributed to the APA removing homosexuality as a mental illness just the next year at their very next conference. So a great Kentuckian, an amazing history, and this month they'll be unveiling the marker to Dr. Fryer in Winchester, Kentucky. Right
wow.
there.
Very cool.
Alright, so we're going to move on to the library. I'm going to talk outside the library after the fact because they close at 7 and I want to give you guys some time to look at the exhibit. So we're going to go in, and it's on the 3rd floor of the exhibit. So it might take some time to do elevators. There are stairs, I believe, in the back. But 3rd floor of the library, we are going to go
Tell
see
that man
our
take
new
a break.
exhibit. And I can talk to you inside.
Right, tell him he is on leave.
Till the end of June.
Jackson Osborne, if you're watching, you are on leave.
Well, you're probably thinking of Sammy Baby.
Oh, yeah, but I just, you know what,
You're fine. So Josh, tell our viewers, if they were taking the full Pride of Place walking tour, what is the duration? About how long does that take?
It's kind of long. There are some little outskirts that are a little far. I think we said, John, how long is it?
It's a mile, but that's
It's probably more like a mile and a half or two.
Okay.
That I would say involves walking to all of the locations.
And it takes what, a couple hours?
I would say so, yeah.
Okay.
Do that full 2 mile walk.
When is it offered? Is it free?
So we have our Pride of Place walking tour brochure available online for free, and you can request a physical version for free.
Okay.
So it's really built. We premiered in the summer 2020 as a self-guided tour.
Okay.
So very easy to take on your own. There's lots of information in our brochure. But we do these guided tours occasionally for groups that reach out. So if you have a group, you're like, oh, they would love to have this tour, absolutely reach out to us for that.
Awesome. Excuse me.
Come on in.
Thank
So
you,
go
sir.
to the elevator.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'll go with you. Yeah.
Third floor. So there's elevators over there. Or stairs this way. On the third floor, stairs and elevators.
May I have your attention, please? The library will close in 15 minutes. Please gather your materials and check out any library materials.
Oh my gosh. Well, folks, here's a sneak peek of the new Phoenix Park. That wasn't on the agenda, but it's looking good.
Since I'm not going to do the whole thing here, we can talk about the exhibit if you want.
Yeah, if you would. Yeah, you want to walk through or?
Let's go stand by that.
Sure.
They're all around the atrium. There's 8 different panels, double-sided, so you can read them in any order too.
Okay. There it is. We're back.
Yes. So this exhibit is Queer Here and Everywhere: The Roots of Kentucky's LGBTQ History. So this is funded by 250 Lex. There's a logo right there. So they gave us the funding to create 8 of these double-sided panels. I think they're 9 feet tall and 3 feet wide. And they're all around the atrium at the Lexington Public Library Central Branch on the 3rd floor up until June 26th. And then they'll be at the Lexington Pride Festival on June 28th, and then later this fall at the Lexington History Museum. So very excited, and also excited to continue growing the exhibit with more panels, getting more grants. So this exhibit is able to travel anywhere in the state, really. So if anybody wants this exhibit at their venue, in their library, their community center, we would love to have it there. So you can reach out to us on your website, however you can get in contact with us. Yes, and we're very happy with this. It's been a year in the making, but then the archive's been around for 10 years, so really 10 years.
Yeah.
But also the archive's built on so many decades of people preserving their own queer history and that around them. So this really is a culmination of a lot of people's work.
So its permanent home will be the Lexington History Museum when it's not traveling? No.
So we will just, if it's not traveling, then we'll just have it stored.
Okay.
Yeah, this will not have a permanent home anywhere. This will be a purely traveling exhibit that will exhibit hopefully across the state is our goal.
Okay. See it while you can. Yes. Until the word gets out. Cool. And then just one more plug of your website while we have total quiet.
www.faulknermorgan.org.
Awesome.
That'd be great.
Okay.
You want to walk one?
Yeah. So we saw this one. All right.
Yeah, that's Bob. So that's actually the opening night of Johnny Angel. And so if you look at the larger photograph, they cropped it out, the designers. But they are leaned up against a police car.
If you can't read the caption there, it says Robert Morgan and Henry Faulkner outside the Johnny Angel Bar on opening night, May 27th, 1978.
Oh, really?
I was 17 years old. I was with my girlfriend. my dad was always with a contractor.
Excuse me.
So I was just telling her to see all my inside stories. I didn't know that until she asked.
No, this is just.
Yeah, I think it's just well. Right, Bob was right there.
So that's in John's house. Yeah. So John's always had it. So since it started. So for researchers. So yeah. So we have researchers in the pipeline. We don't know about those.
Shelter away or
yeah, we don't have to open.
But this is cool.
No, so this one, let me get open. But this won't be shown at the archive because we don't have that space. We have storage space.
May I have your attention, please? The library will close in 10 minutes. Thank you. Atención, por favor. La biblioteca cerrará en 10 minutos. Gracias.
How recent was that? It's pretty recent. It's on HBO. No, I don't think it was.
Me? You're silly.
You can stay in
This is one of the only photos that
without,
I think it actually
with that sort of in, they're in Nicholas, they're a little outside Nicholasville. Like they're near that. She is.
Yeah, so that filming exhibit actually made
I think she does women's health.
that traveled to, oh gosh, probably like 30 some venues on this page. But it's a bunch of just like small core images. A lot of them are like 5 parts of them. So like I've shown them pieces, I've shown them on walls, like road strips. So easels and like that. So that was sort of the first round that the archive did. The archive kind of looks like before, but then like truly entry traveling. That one
did all of these really
because again, we don't really have a space to build this stuff. So working with different venues and collaborating with other organizations is really the only way we can do that right now. And so these kinds of exhibits are sort of the best way. There's also no real archival material for you.
True.
People can, and they're very easy to put up again. I think John made a joke you could carry and take home with you, which you actually kind of could. But don't do it. Don't do it. John said it.
All right, ready for the next step?
Yes, please. Yes.
When did Divine come to us?
Several times.
Yeah.
I must have this story. So how?
So I know she was at Club Go once, like that's one of the
Yeah. Some other times. Yeah, and so we have multiple tickets from the tour. We have one of the tickets having signed to Brandon from Divine.
All right. Come on. Thank you.
So that was mostly when she had a close relationship with Bradley Nicholson. Because it's kind of funny, like her tours, you'd see, you know, she's in Chicago, she's in New York, she's in Lexington. Like it's weird to look at her tour schedule. Exactly. She very famously, I don't know if it's the Club of Go-Go. I think she was here more than twice. I don't know if it's the Club of Go-Go one or the Cafe LGBTQ one.
And so Savannah walks out on the stage, and Anita's like sitting right there.
Excuse me.
Like that was.
Divine probably thought she was stealing her look. When you look at Divine, you're like,
There's a great picture of designers on stage. There's behind her. Do you know Amy Reed? She's the secretary of her board.
Limestone complex. It's like a, it's all in National Register districts.
Alright, thank you.
And we'll go to the right a little bit in the shade.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
You walk down by the wall. You want to gather over here, and I can do a very short thing over here. Guys will make your way over here.
27. Yeah, something like that. It's about.
Alright, so I'm not sure if you got to see up top in the exhibit the We Won't Talk panel about Jill Raymond. So that case and the sort of FBI investigation and questioning and harassment of Lexington's queer community kind of started with Alfalfa's restaurant in a way. So right here is the new location of Alfalfa's that then closed eventually, but the original location of Alfalfa's restaurant was on Limestone. It was a vegetarian restaurant. But in the 70s, I believe, Susan Sachs and Catherine Powers, two lesbians from Boston, came down here and got jobs at Alfalfa's and really embedded themselves into Lexington's lesbian community especially, but under aliases because they were wanted by the FBI for a bank bomb, I think, or a bank robbery, something along those lines. And so, but they embedded themselves into the lesbian community in Lexington, but then the FBI heard that they were here and came to find them. They left town, but the FBI stayed and decided to interrogate and harass Lexington's queer community, but especially Lexington's lesbian community, and really would harass them, would go into gay bars and photograph them and threaten to out them to their families. We even have reports of people saying that they called their grandmother and said, "Do you know your daughter's a lesbian?" Like to try and get them to talk to the grand jury about Susan Sachs and Catherine Powers. And so in all of that, 6 individuals ended up being arrested, 5 lesbians and 1 gay man, who were called the Lexington Six. And so they were all brought in for questioning to the grand jury, but one of them, Jill Raymond, ended up being in prison for 14 months because of it, because of refusing to talk, even though she had nothing to do with Susan and Catherine. And so that, I think, is a really interesting way of sort of showcasing the way that the FBI, the police, the government does sort of harass queer people throughout time, but also the activism that happens because of that. And so during this time, there were leaflets, there were pamphlets being passed around all over the day bars, talking, you know your rights, you don't have to talk to them, like really reminding people of their rights. And so that was happening in the day bars while all this was happening. They were sites of, celebration, but also sites of activism and community building through that. And so Alfalfa sort of became a major part of that FBI harassment with them. It's a little loud over here, so we're going to go now in front of crossings. We're going to be on the park side, so we have an easier view. We'll walk this way. I know, it's hard. I hate to do it before and not having it there. I lived there when I was in college in transit. So it's been a long time. Yeah. I'm glad we have a photo of it. Alfalfa's so they moved from Limestone here. Yeah. That's like the McDonald's area. So there were a lot of buildings that were probably torn down. Yeah. I know I've been really looking at how many people were on this how many gay bars and gay No, we're not. I'm not waiting.
That's what they did. And so what was interesting about it, this was a Nixon Department of Justice tactic. So what they would do is they would preempt these people, therefore they couldn't get arrested for anything they said. And Therefore, they claim you can no longer prove it. So non-testified. That has now been deemed unconstitutional. An unconstitutional practice.
Also, while we're waiting right here, something of note too. So this location of Phoenix Park used to be the site of the Phoenix Hotel, which was also very notorious for cruising for men, especially in the 30s and 40s. And it's rumored to be also the first time that the police used one-way mirrors to arrest the men that were sitting and cruising. So a lot of things happening in that Phoenix Hotel.
Oh.
Double check the year.
I mean, it's good to have aspiration.
So across the street here, if you can't tell from the gay pride flag, this is Crossings. So Crossings was opened in 1989 by Lexington men's leather group called Colts. And so it was opened as a men's only leather bar for many years. And then they would have many parties in that space. Why did my blink? I might just stop. But this, you know, with the bar complex, this is really the second longest running gay bar in Lexington. Has been operating since 1989. But one thing I think is interesting to note is that in, I think, 2014, well, it changed hands multiple times in the years, but in 2014 it was actually bought by a lesbian. And so now this men's only leather bar has really shifted into being a much more queer dive bar. So it's really interesting to see how the space itself has changed through the decades, through different ownership. You can still there's still the classic clientele that come in the afternoon. They're open every day, which is interesting because the bar complex is only open Thursday through Saturday. And really the two only exclusively gay bars in the city now. There have been a lot throughout the years. Club A Go-Go, Cafe Elemental Key, Club 141, a lot of, you can name a billion, but these are really the only two that have lasted so far. So Crossings is still a very gay space, and we love it. And right here across from the Pride Festival too was always a big thing. So Pride, Lexington Pride Festival happened here for many, many, many years in the Courthouse Plaza. And so that was also very much connected to Crossings. People went in and out. A very gay space. And sometimes people really refer to this as Rainbow Road as well, because we have the Rainbow Crosswalk, we have Crossings, there's what's it called? Oh, what's that? Old Hookers. Old Hookers. And then obviously the bar not too far away. So this is all really very gay area. So the city center block had a lot of gay spaces. Yeah, so this area is long.
It's sometimes called the Fruit Loop.
Love that.
Questions, crossings?
Has it always been called Crossings? Has it always been?
Yeah. So it started as Crossings. They did have a slogan for a while that was "Where Men Meet." So that was Crossings, where men meet for a long time. So it's also, you know, talking about the crossings of the road, this intersection, talking about being a place where men meet. But also one of the co-founders' name was Marcus Cross, and so that was also a pleasant kind of coincidence or on purpose naming. So.
Awesome.
Cool. All right, now we're going to walk over to the Sweet Union Breeze mural, which is across the street by that green building you can see over there. That'll be, we're going to finish the tour. community and like smaller community like
The air went to
oh, you love to have this one.
Or news
vacancy. But often it's with the villages that we have one up. And they're very important. And so if someone takes a picture of the side of the world, just show them. Absolutely.
But it's like peer pressure to keep everybody, I think. It's like, let's see how this goes.
I thought I had that thing. I've completed today. And then I'm gonna write all the photos. Give one dedication.
Just tell them everything. Talk about
One year ago, we see what a lovely jazzy
Oh, you're fine. Yeah, we'll do it.
So this plaque was another thing helped by just fund in the city of Lexington and Prohibition and the mural by Gaia, street art, mother of us all.
Yeah.
No, it's been around a few years ago. I think the date's on. It might be
You ought to get a picture.
against the wall.
Alright, so finishing out our tour, we have a new mural of Faulkner Breeze. This was made in 2022. I think it's when we unveiled it. So this is the first major piece of public art, and really only major piece of public art to an LGBTQ individual in Lexington. Is this painting, or is this mural of Faulkner Breeze? And so Sweets was this hard to define character. She didn't identify necessarily a drag queen or a trans woman, but she did wear a lot of women's clothing at night, especially strolling the streets of Lexington, but also during the day worked as an orderly at the hospital as a man, but was also very beloved for their time as someone who was born in the late 1800s. The parents were formerly enslaved. She experienced a lot in this town, but was very much herself throughout all of it. We have records of her performing the Passion Dance of the Bongo Bangos as Faulkner Breeze at the Woodland Park Auditorium in the 1930s. And so that's, well-documented history. And A.B. Guthrie, in his autobiography, actually says that the most famous person from Lexington is not Adolph Rupp, but a black, queer, cross-dressing person named Faulkner Breeze. And so, has a lot of fame, a lot of power in the town. And so having this mural to her feels really special. And so the big photo right here is The Mother of Us All by John Ashley that he took in 1971, I believe. And so that photo is sort of the iconic one of Sweets, as she really was, people refer to as the mother of us all, as sort of the mother of the gay community in the scene. People really looked up to her. She helped a lot of people. Henry Faulkner lived with her for a little bit when he was younger. So yeah, Sweets is pretty incredible, but hosts womanless weddings that were actually fundraisers for her church as well. Also, a lot of those are with UK football players. We have photos of that as well. Yeah, very, very fascinating.
The artist of this mural?
Yes.
A gay person or no?
Yes, I believe the person is queer. It's Gaia is their name. They're not from Lexington. They're out of town, but I believe they're queer.
They're from where?
I don't know exactly where they're from. They were not from here. But Prohibition brought them, the mural group. So I don't know too much about the artists themselves.
I think they're based out of Maryland, if I remember correctly. They were great, though.
Yeah.
You think they were gay?
I mean, I don't have any evidence of it, but I assumed.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you can see on the very top right photo is Sweets on her couch in a wedding dress. The photo in the middle on the right, we don't actually think Sweets is in it, but that is some drag happening at the Woodland Auditorium around the same time that Sweets would have been doing that. And then the very bottom is actually a photo of Sweets with Tiffy at the living room bar that we saw earlier when the bar was the living room. Tiffy is her name. You kind of cut off, but.
Are there other photos from this series of?
From John.
I mean, he didn't take just one photo.
That's a good question.
So we actually very recently, so John Ashley was very specific about only showing his final products. He didn't like to have a lot from the same shoot or from the same moment. So typically, yeah, this is really the only photo we would have of this. But actually recently, we got a bunch of these negative contact sheets that had a lot of the sort of missed photos that he didn't like, he was Xing out, things like that. We didn't actually get a sheet of this specific one, which I was very sad about. But we got some photos of the Pagan Babies photos. So John Ashley was really the major photographer with R. Michael Walker of the Pagan Babies, which was one of the panels in the exhibit as well. Yeah, we actually don't really have any other photos from this moment, but we would love to. We have, I think, a total of 7 unique photos of Sweets. 8.
Something like that.
Very, very few photos of Sweets that are like unique. And so it's finding new photos of Sweets has been a very difficult task. So yeah.
Ask AI. You ask your AI.
We did not ask AI yet.
There you go.
Any questions?
When he died?
83. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very. Birthday is
Sweets. Yeah, Sweets outlived Henry by about 2 years.
He was in his 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As I used to say, I mean, he walked all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know if he ever drove. He walked everywhere.
Never got their license.
This is not uncommon to see him walking.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons that we did it on this block is because Sweets took her famous evening strolls, and North Limestone was one of the places you could often see her. In fact, the first evidence we have of her in Lexington is from 1920, and she is getting arrested on North Limestone for, I think it's disorderly conduct, had gotten into a fight with, in her own words, some old colored girls while she was on her way to symphony practice. That's probably not true. But that was the story that she told the police as to what she was doing. She was actually born in Georgetown, so she's from Scott County, and we know she was. We don't know exactly when she was born. Probably 1894, because she does show up in the census records of her parents in 1900, and they list her as being 6. But Sweets was so good. I tell this story all the time. But Sweets was so good about lying. In fact, one of her daughters, Leanne Deline, in a later memory called her the Lion Queen, because she could lie about anything. But she was so good at lying about her age that she registered for the draft in World War I. She registered for the draft again in World War II. And so no one knew. And if you go to her headstone in Lexington Cemetery, the dates are way off. So she was quite something. She lived in Prawtown, historic black neighborhood across from UK's campus. Her house is still there. We know she's there by 1920. She shows up in the census records. But she's living with someone she calls her uncle. And then he dies on the train tracks at the back of Prawtown. And so Sweets is the person who does the death certificate record. And she says, you know, I'm his nephew. His last name was Smith, and they asked who his parents were. Sweets didn't know. So that would have been her grandparents, right? And then they asked for his deceased wife's name. She didn't know that either. So I have a feeling Sweets was probably not the nephew of that gentleman. Sweets got everything when he died, and that's how she got the house on Crawtown. And it's after that that Sweets used to first start seeing Sweets as Sweet Evening Breeze. Because so she is a black queer person in a deeply segregated town, you know, in a black neighborhood, but she had some things that protected her. One was she owned her own home, which would have been a big deal. And second, for a black person in a deeply segregated town, she had jobs again. You know, as head orderly of Good Samaritan Hospital, that gave her some financial protection. And so those things were important to her being able to live the life she lived.
The muralist here is Gia,
yeah,
who is from New York.
Is it New York? We were talking about.
Goes by the pronouns she, him. This is thanks to my nephew. That's why we need the young and
Exactly. We were debating it, and you were smart looking it up.
He graduated from Maryland.
I knew there was a Maryland connection.
John, you talk about Sweets died in '83. Who would have put Sweets in Lexington Cemetery? Because blacks sure as hell didn't go to Lexington Cemetery in 1983.
That's a good question.
Who would have buried Sweets in Lexington Cemetery?
That's a good question. We don't know. So we don't know how Sweets got that plot. So there's often in the memories, you know, Sweets told a lot of stories about herself. And one of the most famous that she either told about herself or let other people tell about her was that she was abandoned by her family at Good Samaritan and she was raised there. That's not true. Like the census records show, you know, she's in Georgetown when she's 6. She's in Georgetown living with her parents when she's 16. Now, she could have spent time as a child at Good Sam, we just don't know. But there was this sense that she was like this creature that just appeared out of nowhere, right? Raised, roaming the halls of Good Sam. Yeah. And that sort of gave her, there were also lots of rumors that she was what we now say an intersex, or as they would say hermaphrodite. That also wasn't true, but she let people believe that. You know, she was biologically male. And she's had a close relationship with her family until her death, or close to it. And so we have been, through this research, we've been really lucky. It would have been Sweets' great niece who reached out to us, now a filmmaker, documentary filmmaker in Washington. And so that connected us. So Sweets went off to all the family events, all of that. Her, the nieces, it would have been her grandmother, Sweets' sister, I think that's right. You know, of course, the niece was not alive for any of this, but they would joke that they would have to send word to Sweets that they were coming over to visit. Like, you couldn't just drop in. They call him James, so he was born James Herman. You know, you just couldn't drop in on Uncle James unannounced. We had to send warning. And according to the family, those two sisters were supposed to get the estate of Sweets. It would have been her nieces. But when Sweets got mad at one of them for having a child out of wedlock. Oh.
She had morals.
She had some standards.
Sweets had standards.
She didn't have children.
She didn't, no. And as far as we know, never had a long-term partner. Now, she had someone who lived with her, who was often referred to as tripping through the dude, but as far as we know, that wasn't a romantic relationship. Yeah, so Sweets is buried in Lexington Cemetery. She's not buried near any kin or anyone else, as far as we know that she had a relationship with. But.
And the name Sweet Evening Breeze?
No, James Herndon.
In a tan suit.
In a tan suit. So this was a huge controversy. So she did leave her estate to her church that she loved a whole lot, Pleasant Green. And so they were responsible for the burial, and they very famously buried her in a tan polyester suit. Yeah. And there were lots of folks in the community that liked that.
You know, even if Pleasant Green were burying her, I'm surprised. I'm still surprised she went to Lexington Cemetery as opposed to the cemetery at that time. The early '80s, I guess, would have been the black cemetery off of Georgetown Street. Yeah, Cold Haven used to be green.
Yeah, I've often wondered if
that's where 90% of the black people would have gone at that time.
Yeah.
It's
a good thing to investigate. Yeah.
She was a person of consequence and vision.
Oh, she certainly was.
Yeah.
So we mentioned briefly Tiffy Ross, the queen. Like we wanted to make sure at least her eyes were still there. So Tiffy Ross was a queen. She was the parlance of the time. She was what was called a titty queen. Because so she was a trans woman. She lived her entire life as a woman, and she had real fake breasts. So she was what people called her. She was Tiffy Ross. She was the titty queen. And so she and 3 other queens were performing at what's now the bar complex. This would have been, I think, in 70 or 71. One of the other, they all lived on Ellesmere Park, or at least that's what they told the cops. And the other was one of Sweet's daughters named Leanne Sweet. And so the police are there, they actually raid the bar, they arrest those 4 queens for wearing the spy. And so they book them, and then the 4 go to Sweets' house after they're released. And so Sweets calls the judge. The judge was actually Judge Amato, so who will later become the mayor of Lexington. And so calls the judge, tells the judge this is unfair, right? And you need to drop the charges if you know what's good for you. And he does. He drops the charges. And so that was the last time that a gay bar was rated for being, just for being a gay bar.
So you just said one of those 4 was her daughter.
Well, her drag daughter. So that was, so this sort of chosen family kind of relationship, yeah. And so they would celebrate that. They called it Bastille Day. It was in April. And they would always celebrate the anniversary of that last raid. So when we first published that photograph of Tiffy, the Herald Leader did a story not long after the archive started, so this would have been about 10 years ago. There was a gentleman who reached out through email, very moving, really poignant, and he said, Tiffy Ross was the love of my life. And he said, but because of the time and the circumstances, I just couldn't allow myself to do that. And he said, and I ended up, I married a woman, I had kids, and he was like, if there's not a way, I don't think about Tiffy. And he said that her photograph in that newspaper article was the first time we had seen her.
Awesome.
That's everything.
Yeah?
Thank you.
Awesome.